Alrighty, welcome back to Kinder, Kutsche, and Kirche. So we're going to be looking at part two of Women in Nazi Germany. And this one will be focusing on ideology. And the objectives of this video is to basically understand the ideological underpinnings of the Nazi view of women. Now, of course, one of the things that you're going to want to consider here is keep in mind some of those questions that we talked about in terms of continuity and change from the first video. Here we go. Women in Nazi Germany. Ideologically, it was reactionary to the liberalism of the Weimar Republic. As you know, many of the political parties, and this includes nationalists and the Catholic Center Party, amongst others, that were more conservative and were afraid of the rapid social and political changes brought about by Weimar. And they were also afraid of this because this was a trend that was being seen throughout Europe. And one of the things that we have happening at this time is more women in various countries are being given the right to vote. And one of the things that they saw was that there was a decreasing birth rate because of increased access to contraceptives. And of course, more women were entering the workforce and were getting education. And then the other thing is because of these things, and because once women have access to contraceptives, they tend to use it. And this gives them a certain amount of freedom. And so you have increased employment outside of the home, outside of the traditional sphere of agriculture. So historically, women were always involved in agriculture. But that was kind of seen as traditional and therefore acceptable. And this was also reactionary to the economic woes of the Great Depression. Basically, what you have is a lot of unemployed men. And this, one of the things that happens is you have an increase in the discrimination against women with a preference to employ men. It was also traditionalist. That is, it was a resistance to the ills and problems that had been brought about by modernist ideology. So one of the things that you want to consider is remember to those days long, long ago when we talked about Nazi ideology and the problems of modernism that had been developing with industrialization, with ideas of socialism and communism. And so this was an opportunity to reverse the trends of the 20th century. They saw women as being primarily homemakers and child bearers. And so the idea here was to kind of revert back to the traditional roles of women. It was also connected to the ideas of racial purity because women as homemakers and childbearers were important to the state because as such, they then provided the strong genetically pure Germans that would ensure the strength and the supremacy of Germany as both a country and a people. And so their job was to breed genetically pure Germans. Additionally, this is the idea of the importance of the family to the state. The family was the building block of this strong German nation, and women were the ones to nurture that. Therefore, for the Nazis ideologically, women had an important, if different, role to men in the functioning of the state. Men were to be warriors and basically carry the state on their back, and women were supposed to produce those strong warriors for the functioning state. And the thing though, and we'll talk about this in the next video, or the next video, there were contradictions to this ideology because the practicalities changed. So the needs of the state changed, and as time went on and the economic priorities changed, so did the policies toward women. And as you can see here, we have a handy dandy diagram of what the Nazi ideal woman was supposed to look like, as opposed to the woman of the modern era that was coming from France and the US and were heavily criticized by the Nazis. So, an ideal Nazi woman was to have blue eyes, was to be blonde, was to be concerned only with the home sphere, was supposed to have big old childbearing hips. So, broad hips to make childbearing easy. Clothes were supposed to be homemade. They were also supposed to dress modestly. The skirts would be long and not form fitting. They were to wear shoes. They were not supposed to wear makeup. So kind of contrast that with some of the images you saw of what women were dressing like, especially in urban areas and places like Berlin and the nightlife of Berlin during Weimar. And as you can see on the right, some imagery of the criticisms, right? So many of these women had professional careers outside the home. They were fashion conscious and they wore makeup. They were slim and skinny. And that was the ideal of beauty of the flapper era. They had dyed permed hair. It was short. It was ostentatious. They smoked, which was a traditionally male activity. They wore pants because the only one supposed to be wearing pants in the house is the man, right? And of course, they're wearing high heels, which are incredibly impractical, especially if she's supposed to be doing housework and or helping on the farm. So, just a quick overview of some of the ideas of womanhood that were an integral aspect of Nazi ideology. And then, therefore, the policies are going to represent or reflect that ideology.